You know, the most striking truth about subtext traps is that the most dangerous messages are the ones that are never actually spoken aloud. We tend to think that communication is all about the words we use, but in these really high-pressure situations, the words are often just a decoy. They're there to keep your logical brain busy while the real message gets delivered through tone, timing, and everything that's being left unsaid.
Just let that sink in for a second. I mean, it turns everything we think we know about communication completely on its head, right? It suggests that the most critical information, the stuff that really controls how we feel and what we do, exists in that empty space, in the pauses, the implications, the things someone chooses not to say. This is the world of subtext, and when it's used like a weapon, man, it can be incredibly confusing.
And that gets us right to the heart of the mystery we're unpacking today. I'm sure you felt this. Someone says something that if you wrote it down seems totally fine, maybe even nice. Like, wow, you're so brave for wearing that. Or, it's so cool you're not worried about what other people think. The words themselves are positive, but what you feel is a sting. And that's the core paradox of a subtext trap. It's that exact moment your own social intelligence, your own politeness gets twisted and used as the very tool to shut you down.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the unspoken insult itself. Then we'll dive into the double bind system. These are the toxic environments where this stuff really thrives. After that, we'll map out the architecture of control and the modus behind what's called control without accountability. And most importantly, we are going to get to the tools for reclaiming your reality and learn how to shift the burden of clarity right back where it belongs.
So let's start with a basic problem here, the unspoken insult. Now, this isn't just some simple misunderstanding. It's a dynamic where the very things that make you a polite, empathetic, and socially aware person, your ability to read a room, to catch a vibe, are actually turned against you to keep you feeling confused and off balance.
What's so powerful about this is how it shows the switch that happens in your brain. Healthy communication, that's an active dialogue. You're in it, you assume things are clear, you take words at their face value. But inside a subtext trap, you get forced into passive decoding. You're not a participant anymore. You're more like an interpreter, constantly scanning for hidden meanings, trying to sidestep these invisible landmines. It's not a conversation, it's a total cognitive stress test.
And this kind of dynamic doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It needs a specific kind of environment to grow in, something that behavioral science calls a double bind system. This is where the rules of communication get so twisted and contradictory that you're basically set up to fail no matter what you do, and it leads to this state of complete and total interpretive exhaustion.
Okay, so here's the bottom line. A double bind is when the words say one thing, but the unspoken message, the tone, the context, the body language says the complete opposite. For example, someone might say, "Oh, of course I want you to be honest with me," but then every single time you are, you get the cold shoulder. The words are inviting honesty, but the subtext is punishing it. You're completely trapped.
And this is where you see these traps pop up all the time. Think about those cliquey creative groups where approval is just given and taken away without anyone saying a word. Or those high-conflict families where saying how you actually feel is the quickest way to start a huge fight. And of course, the classic passive-aggressive office culture. The common thread here is any environment where being direct is seen as a threat and insinuation becomes the main way people wield power.
When you're stuck in these environments long enough, the effect is really deep. To survive, to keep the peace, you basically teach yourself to self-gaslight. Your gut is screaming, "That was an insult," but your conscious brain, which is desperate to avoid a fight, starts looking for the nice version of what they said. You tell yourself, "Oh, they probably didn't mean it like that." And over time, you start to systematically distrust your own, very accurate perception.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the where. Now let's get into the how. Because this isn't random. There is a specific architecture of control at play here, a set of tactics that are used on purpose to create ambiguity and hold on to power.
It usually follows a pretty clear three-step playbook. It kicks off with what's called the Semantic Decoy, it's reinforced by pointed silence, and the whole thing is protected by the Plausible Deniability Shield. When you see these three things working together, you're not just dealing with bad communication, you're looking at a systematic pattern of behavioral management.
All right, let's break down that first step. The semantic decoy is basically the art of weaponizing neutral language. It's that phrase that, if you just wrote it down on paper, would look completely harmless. "I'm just surprised you chose to do it that way." Or a simple, "Good for you." The words themselves are just decoys. Their job is to be technically defensible, while the tone and the context deliver the real message: disapproval, judgment, or a command to change what you're doing.
The second tactic is pointed silence. And this is where it gets really powerful.
You do something, and boom, you hit a wall of nonverbal coldness. The texts get shorter, the air gets chilly. You know you've broken some unspoken rule, but when you ask, hey, is everything okay? The answer is always, I'm fine. The silence is the punishment, and because they refuse to tell you what you did wrong, it creates this massive anxiety, forcing you to just scramble and guess.
And this whole cycle, the decoy, the silence, the scrambling to figure it out, is so incredibly draining. It leads to what's called interpretive exhaustion. Your brain learns this really dangerous lesson, that taking words at face value, being literal, is a social failure that gets you punished. So to stay safe, you have to constantly be decoding, analyzing, and trying to predict the other person's unspoken feelings. Your mind just never, ever gets a rest.
So this just begs the question, why? Why would anybody communicate like this, and why are some of us more likely to fall for it? This gets us to the psychological engine that drives this whole dynamic, the desire for control without any accountability.
This slide just lays it all out, side by side. The controller's motivation is to get absolute leverage. They can control your behavior through hints and subtext. They never have to actually own their commands. They can control you, and if you ever call them on it, they can just deny the whole thing by saying, I never said that. Now on the other side, the target's vulnerability often comes from this deep need for social safety, a desire to just keep the peace and not make things weird, which they value more than their own need for clarity.
Now, what's really wild is that there's a biological reason this works so well. It's called implicit social cognition. Basically, our brains are hardwired to process nonverbal cues, tone of voice, a tiny pause, body language, way faster and more powerfully than the actual words being said. That's why an insult delivered with a smile feels so bizarre. Your brain processes the hostile subtext in an instant, even while your logical mind is still trying to catch up with the nice words.
Okay, so we have completely dissected the trap. We get the what, where, how, and why. Now for the most important part, how do we get out of it? Let's pivot from just analyzing to taking action. This is all about reclaiming your reality with some defensive tools for awareness and self-protection.
The very first tool is a simple but really powerful mental exercise called the Transcript test. The next time you're feeling confused in a conversation, just pause and ask yourself this question. Imagine you had a written transcript of what was just said. Would your emotional reaction make any sense based only on those printed words? Or are you reacting to the shadows, the tone, the implications? This test creates this crucial little space between what was said and what was just insinuated.
And that test is really just the beginning of a bigger strategy. First, you have to recognize that you're stuck in this hyper-vigilance loop, constantly on the lookout for threats. From there, you consciously work on developing what we can call Radical Literalism Awareness. This means you make a deliberate choice to respond only to the literal meaning of the words someone says to you. You stop guessing, you stop filling in the blanks, you fundamentally refuse to do the emotional labor of mind reading for someone else.
This right here, this is the core affirmation. It's giving yourself permission to stop carrying the weight of someone else's ambiguity. You are allowed to ignore what is not said. If somebody needs something from you or has a problem with you, then they need to use their words to say it. It is not your job to go digging for their unspoken feelings. Just let that sink in.
And that brings us to our final crucial takeaway. This whole dynamic is built on a complete misunderstanding of who is responsible for what. The person caught in a subtext trap often feels like it's their job to figure it all out. But the truth is, the burden of clarity is, and it must always be, shared.
At the end of the day, your mind is your own private space. Nobody else has the right to fill it up with their anxieties, their insecurities, or their unspoken demands. Being aware of these patterns is the tool you use to guard that space. It's what ensures that someone else's insinuation doesn't become a cage that limits your own freedom, your own voice, and your own autonomy.
So we'll leave you with this one final thought, which is really the ultimate summary of this whole explainer. It's a boundary, it's a mantra, and it's a strategy all rolled into one. If a problem, a request, or an expectation isn't clearly and respectfully spoken aloud, it is not your responsibility to decode it, to anticipate it, or to fix it. Take the words for what they are and leave the unspoken shadows right at the door.